Hi, welcome back to another episode of the FM Channel podcast. My name is Claudio Rojas. I'm one of the co-owners and senior recruiters at Alex Young Recruitment. Today, I am joined by Mickey Rooney. Mickey, thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Before we go into the interview, if you like, I'm just going to do a quick little intro to the show for anybody that hasn't listened or tuned in before. So the FM Channel podcast is all about speaking to people from the industry and learning about the person behind the job title, as one of the viewers actually emailed me and put it, which is a good description actually. So yeah, the idea is to kind of hear people's story from a different backgrounds, how they got into FM, what they like about the industry, just so we can see who the people are that are in the sector, who's running the show really. So before we go into your journey, Mickey, could you first give us a bit of an intro as to what you currently do and who you do it for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at JLL, as you said, a program director. What does that mean? It's a pretty open title. I work within corporate solutions. JLL effectively breaks down into three delivery divisions. There's the wealth market bits, capital markets, which is almost like a banking function. Our valuation advisory, which is effectively a state agency, albeit really large, complicated estate agency. And I work in corporate solutions. So we're the part of the business that delivers services into whoever is using this space, whether it be occupiers or owners. So things like IFM, space planning, doing rental management, all those kind of aspects. Yeah. I work within the EMEA team, and as a program director, I'm leading a team that is digitizing services. So one of the big jobs we had was Integral, which lots of people know, it's an M&E provider, was acquired by JLL in 2017, and then it had to be integrated into the business. So from 2018 onwards, we did a reset of the way it's structured, done a little bit of a rebrand for those that have seen it lately to align it more to JLL's colours, but also JLL's message. And the big bit was technology insertion. So having rearranged people and process, we've then done technology. And on the back of that, they're very much an alpha program because they're right at the front end for changing the way we're delivering services into the built environment, looking at on demand, so ubererization. And the other part is, people call it smart tech, smart in buildings. Yeah. Actually, we're looking at, with the technology that's already there, we augment it with a number of sensors, whether wired or wireless, and we're moving everything onto analytics for prediction and data processing, which then generates greater value, both for the client, but also better cost control, and ultimately better activity for us as a company, whether it be, if we use Integral, for an engineer doing better, more interesting engineering, being much more engaged in the process, to our valuation and advisory teams that are looking to use that data to understand the cost and use of space so that they're approaching the market in a better way and ensuring that the clients that we interact with get a better value deal in terms of people, place, and profit. And the people and place, I think, were found in 2020 into 2021 have become much more important. Everybody has now got net zero carbon, looking after the planet as a really core part of their agenda. But embodied in that is really looking after our people. And if there was ever a year to prove to us how important our people are, it was last year. The need for everybody to effectively shift to work from home meant that some people have liked it, some people haven't. I had a really good quote the other day that, are we working from home or are we now all just living at work?
That is so true. That is so true.
And I think quite a lot of people, they feel that way. Yeah. So the follow-on programs that I'm lucky enough to be involved with are looking at how we use technology to improve the way our people work in JLL, but also for our clients, how they can work better, and collectively how we can look after the built environment in a far better way than perhaps we have done over the last 30 years.
Yeah, excellent. That's sounds really interesting. So, I guess in the last year for you, it's been super busy for you guys then, I guess. The shift that you've had to make with everybody working from home, I guess, is your kind of focus gone from here to there, or is it kind of just speeded up really? Or
I think the speeding up is one. Inevitably, most of the stuff we do is based on volumes coming out of the built environment, whether it be offices or big box solutions or government buildings, and quite a lot, even with government buildings still operating, revenues reduced the same as it did for everybody.
Yeah.
So we had to engage in furlough quite a lot of the senior staff had to take voluntarily took a pay cut to ensure we protected the company and our plan. But in truth, while we didn't really miss a step in what we were going to do as a plan, some of the timelines were stretched out. But as we hit towards the back end of the year, actually, it just allowed us to prep to accelerate some of the plans that we were going to do in 21 and 22. So one of them was kind of the on-demand offering was going to have a longer lead time, and we were going to approach market and do it in phases. Because the market's opened up where everybody's kind of got quite a harsh monetary position now, because when you look at the liquidity of most companies, it's been threatened. Their revenues have slowed down. They've continued having to pay a certain amount of bills plus their people. So cash is king, and they're really, really cash sensitive. So something like an on-demand product where you go, no contract, no excess commitment, you order what you want. Yes, our terms and conditions change in the way we respond because it's much more like Uber. But bringing those products forward became absolute paramount. So we were able to accelerate some of our plans by taking 2 years out of what we're going to do. And as we start to see some buildings open up again, although we've gone back to lockdown, it's made great traction. So I think overall, if you look at the end-to-end position, it's shortened. The stuff in the middle, we just rejigged. But quite a lot of people found being able to deliver that initially a bit disorientating because we were like this, miles apart, stuck on screens. But I got to say, human beings are pretty adaptable, and pretty much all our workforce, like our clients and customers, we're really lucky to have. Everybody adjusted pretty quickly, and I think because we do FaceTime with family, and we're all quite tech savvy actually in the UK. Definitely for kind of UK and EMEA. We found the new way of working pretty quickly and adjusted. I think our hours are stretched, as I say, just feel like you're living at work a lot of the time, but because you can't go out and you can't do other things, in some cases you go, well, let's carry on with some of our more interesting projects. So I think it's been quite successful in terms of progress. And we've obviously had to navigate rough waters the same as pretty much every other company on the planet, which we've navigated pretty well. We've had a bit of a dent, we hit one or two big waves, as it were, but we've come out of 20 in not bad shape. We're prepped really, really well for 21. I think in truth, you'll see the fruits of all the labours for the companies that have repositioned, done digital advancements in 2022, and that's kind of what we're expecting as well.
Yeah, good stuff. I think it was interesting how you mentioned that we quickly adapted. I guess we had to, but I think it was also there was an element of, I can't help but think it was a bit exciting at the very beginning, because I feel like we all thought 3 to 6 months working from home, the sun was shining, this could be all right. I was kind of getting my work done by sort of, 3:30, 4 o'clock, beer in the garden. It was great. But then after 6 months, 7 months, and it was like, this is going to go on for quite a while. And it's like, oh no. But I think we adapted quite quickly. But I think we've all had enough now. So hopefully the vaccine will start to kick in. But they seem to be getting through it quite quickly anyway, which is quite good. Cool.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right on that observation that there's a novelty at first, wasn't there? For those that don't do a portion of working from home, there's a little bit of fad factor, and people adjusted. So, you see loads of scenes on social media with people baking with the kids and getting up early in the morning and doing exercise. And then after 6 or 7 months, the discipline to stick with effectively an enforced new way of living. And in truth, I said this as a bit of a gag to someone the other day. We're very lucky anyway in the UK, probably some more than others, and we've got lots of out in the sticks, so we've got kind of lots of space around us. In a way, we're living in a very pleasant open prison because we've had our liberty restricted new rules. And I think that is becoming tiresome for people now because of the restriction on liberty, not so much working from home. But, it's as we come out of it, it will feel like an elastic band snapping. We heard Jess Staley from Barclays said it, he posed, this is the death of the office. No, it's the start of using office space in a different way. And I think it's advancing the way that we can be more flexible in our working patterns. But the majority of our those that were both tenants and some of our owner occupiers, they've largely renewed in a similar way. So they're not giving up their space. What we expect them to do is reuse their space now in a different fashion, and the way they operate will change. So it'll be that's why it makes it quite interesting in this next phase of vaccines working and lockdowns being eased, how we do find ourselves back into a kind of a more conventional working routine.
Yeah.
The commutes will be slightly different, but lots and lots of people will still commute because they will want to go to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is that routine we had of doing whatever our commute was, grabbing a coffee at the station, reading the paper, or doing a bit on the laptop. Some people would miss that because at the moment we roll out of bed and you're at work and you're like,
yeah, exactly. And if you don't go for a walk in the morning, then that's it. You're just in the office space
absolutely.
or not. I mean, I was speaking to a client the other day, and he was saying that within their business they've got a lot of call centers, and he said it's a nightmare because it says a lot of our people who take the calls, who are normally in a call center, they might be in their 20s, 30s. They're in a shared house. They're in their bedroom taking these calls on the bed. And he said it's the well-being for some people. It's all nice for some people who've got the space, have got the house, have got the garden. But he said for a lot of people, a lot of our people who work in the call centers, they're locked in their bedroom on the phone, like waiting for these calls to come through. And it's like something that you don't really think of. That, God, yeah, that's got to be. I mean, that's got to be a nightmare. There she is.
It is. Well, this is classic anyway, isn't it? Because this is part of modern work now, that at some point homeschooling will find its way into the office.
Where are we going in half term?
Argate.
Argate?
Yes.
No, we're not.
We are. It's at the bottom of our garden. Just been asked where we're going at half term. We're going no more than about 5 miles away from the house.
No, where, Daddy? Just tell me.
We don't know.
Oh.
There you go. There's one of those restrictions we were talking about, because for kids, we've got three. We've got 3 kids, varied age. They've been homeschooling, which has been one of the other challenges, the real importance of school and getting back to that normality. And in some cases, I don't think it's really settled. Hence, that question was where we're going on holiday at half term. We're not going anywhere.
No, nowhere.
As nobody is. And we are lucky that we've got biggest garden and we're out in the out in the countryside. But then you think about people central London, where I said it's kind of like being in a pleasant open prison.
Yeah.
For those people that are stuck in a flat where there's stiffer restrictions, then actually everyone's joining in, aren't they? Then actually for them that will just feel like prison.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're in a shared house, like I was quite a few years back, it's got to be a nightmare. Anyway, listen, let's go. So that's your current position. Thank you for that. And so let's go back to the beginning. So if you can tell us, how did you get into the industry? Did you choose to be in the industry? Did you fall into the industry like many do? What's your background? How did you get in?
It's an interesting question to say, like many do. How many people choose to find their way into this industry? You know more than most because you get into recruitment. So,
yeah. Not many, really. Not many.
Not many.
No.
And I am one of those that this was not part of career or occupational plans. So I was in the military. I spent 25 years in the Royal Navy. Hugely enjoyable and I guess by what you wear on your shoulders, fairly successful career.
Yeah.
And in a way, even though some of my skill sets match across, it was less conventional for what people in my trade did. So I was a weapons engineer. So I'm probably one of the few rocket scientists that found themselves in the built environment.
Yeah.
And I worked on various ships, did all of the sort of combat type roles, where I was in First and Second Gulf War.
Yeah.
I was in Bosnia, Sierra Leone, got to have a more senior role for something like Libya. So I was deeply involved in the command of what we did in Libya. And made my way up to a certain rank and was also head of a part of the complex weapons program, so missiles.
Right.
So some of the missile systems you now see underslung on a plane, stuck on the back of a truck, or on some of our warships. I was in charge of that part of the program for a while. And
in terms of what, actually building them, making them, or kind of?
Some where you own the design phase, they're all built by our defence industry anyway. So you'll sit in as system engineer or a program director, so I did a program director's role there. And for the close-in weapons systems and short-range missile systems, I worked for a group called SHORAD, Short Range Air Defence. And there was something called Seawolf missile, which people may remember way back when from the Falklands. It went through a number of updates, and then there was a really modern version we did with. That was probably the most high-tech thing I got to work with, actually. That was then superseded by something called Sea Scepter, which again, that's a fast bit of kit. That was a real smart bit of kit. Sea Viper, which is on the bigger ships, and then I worked with the Type 45 destroyers, so I ended up being sort of head of platform for a while with those.
Yeah.
And that's the ones with the big golf ball radar on top. And one of those missile sets for Sea Scepter becomes Land Scepter, and is also going to be the replacement that goes underslung on the RAF planes. So we kind of owned it with huge teams underneath us, so huge budgets. And my budget was like £1.1 billion for part of the programme. Really, really interesting job. You get to work with some really great people, incredibly dedicated, whether in uniform or out of uniform. But quite a lot of what we did, because for a missile system to work, it's attached to a whole system with inside a ship. And a ship is very similar to core buildings. It's got air conditioning, has power generation, HV and LV. Plus then it's got its own data center built within the ship. It has an airport at the back end. It's got a seaport left and right because you load boats off it. Plus at all times, it's a specialist storage vessel because it's got highly dangerous cargo. So all the qualifications and experience you have, to a point, it's a little bit easier in the built environment because the buildings don't shift around at 30 miles an hour for 24 hours a day in all weathers. They largely stand still. But one of my latter jobs I did, I worked at a group called Permanent Joint Headquarters. So that's where they kind of run all the plans for all of the operations around the world 24/7. And most people won't know, but we hold 5 permanent operating bases around the world where we effectively own the land. And they're fairly large scale. So we have Cyprus, where we still own 2 bits of Cyprus called sovereign base areas, Gibraltar, Falkland Islands, and Ascension, and then this enormous swathe of the Indian Ocean called the British Indian Ocean Territories. So I sat within the structure that looked after those. You had direct desk command of, I think, the work in London, yet you commanded them all around the world. And with that came all of the infrastructure. So airports, all the buildings, including the contracts, which were kind of Interserve, Serco. So we held the contracts for those companies, and a company called DG21, which was run from America for some of it. So that was kind of my first taster, and it was for working within the built environment and managing it. Again, big budgets. And part of it was bringing the cost down. The cost of ownership of infrastructure and buildings is huge, absolutely huge and complicated. So it wasn't kind of my core trade. It was, I don't know, a higher command job, but it was incredibly interesting. And what I found really interesting was how antiquated both the processes and the way we approach buildings, whether it be looking after airports or ports or quite big box solutions because we had logistics sheds, and coming from quite high tech, that really was cutting edge, and looking at how we operated the built environment. I thought, wow, outside you must be able to make a killing making this more efficient, because it just wasn't efficient the way we contracted, the way we measured, the way we didn't use technology. So I kind of had some interest. I got to a point with our 3rd child, hit my next pension point. My wife said, enough, can you get a proper job now? So I it was actually because I put my notice in, and I'd negotiated a position with the European Space Agency, so I was going back into that kind of spacey, rockety area, and they were opening a kind of a new centre in Harwell in Oxfordshire, which isn't far from where I live. So I went through the process. I kind of secured a role, and then there was an incident in the Gulf, and I'd only been out of the Navy at that point for 3 weeks. And it was the day after my 3rd was born, the little one that just came in before. And the elastic band was snapped, and I got a call from Commander-in-Chief Fleet's office to say, we've had a fairly serious injury with one of the commanders out in the Gulf. Ultimately, because the ship I'd been on was the prep to go out next, they said, we haven't got him on rotation. We're going to, when they have an allowance to do it, and we're going to have to pull you back in for a few weeks. So I was asked if I could fly out from Brize Norton the next day, which I went, that's a bit racy, can I go in a few days? So I had to get myself battle prepped again, and ended up out in the Gulf, and it was during more heightened tension around things going on in Syria. So I went out for 3 weeks. 4 months later, I was still there, stuck out between Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. So the role I was going to go to was lost. I got to say, though, it was a glorious last 4 months in the Royal Navy. So we achieved the thing we needed to achieve, and I had the best exit from the Navy. So I was on HMS Kent, was the last ship I served in, and the ship's helicopters, something called a Merlin, huge thing, and they needed to get me off while I was at sea. So the middle of the Indian Ocean, they puddle jumped me to HMAS Newcastle, an Australian ship, and I was met on the flight deck from one of my old buddies from university who'd been in the Royal Navy, and then he'd emigrated and swapped over to the Aussie Navy. So he met me on the flight deck. We watched the British Lions beat Australia in the captain's cabin on there with him.
Nice.
I was then picked up the next day, dunked in the sea by their pilot because he was an Aussie and transferred to a French ship. And the French ship steamed me towards Djibouti. And then the French Foreign Legion came out and picked me up the dead of night in a Super Puma and skimmed me into Djibouti under the cover of darkness, about 50 feet off the sea. It was absolutely brilliant.
Amazing,
I was then met by the security escort for the royal family of Saudi Arabia. I was put on a private jet up to Riyadh and then first class on Air France back to Heathrow.
Crikey, that is a journey back, isn't it, eh?
Sink Fleet took me to my in-laws' house, and they're quite a big pad, where my family were waiting with us with the TV out on the lawn to watch Andy Murray win Wimbledon. So if you're ever going to leave a job on a moment of glory, it was absolutely, because prior to that, I had been on HMS Westminster. I'd left on a wet Wednesday in Plymouth and handed the keys over and just got in my car and drove home, which after 25 glorious years was a bit of a damp squib, so it was a good way to leave. So anyway,
I feel like you just described a scene from James Bond or something. Do you know what I mean?
I got some great photos from it.
To top it off, you walk in and Andy Murray's just won Wimbledon and everyone's having strawberries and cream and champagne on the lawn.
It was fantastic. And it was beautiful sunshine because they were sat out in the garden watching it. So I was then without a role to go to. And on LinkedIn, somebody messaged me on LinkedIn about, because they knew about armed forces people transferring into the built environment.
Yeah.
And I think you know him, Sean Sexton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Sean gave me a call, said it was a role that, could have a chat about it. In the end, they looked at the role and went, actually, might be a bit too senior for it. So then Candice had a chat with me at the same company, because she was working at the same company at the time.
I know her.
And a role she'd been approached about, which was around government estate, has some sensitivity around it. It was fixed term contract, said actually maybe of interest. The guy running it, that was with Bouygues, wanted a chat, mainly because of military background, and it may just be a bit of a taster about what we could do. So had a chat with the company. They were really, really keen, and because I was available for the first 3 months anyway, the Navy said actually you can kind of go for free. So I stepped into Bouygues, found it really interesting. We got to the end of the fixed term contract period, and I'd met the team at NG Bailey, and they had a particular problem, and they do like problems. If it's already running on rails, it's not normally for me. So Stuart approached me and said, come in for a chat about numbers. And in the end, they made a bigger number and it was about pay really. So I stepped into NG Bailey, did a few really good years with them, did some digital stuff with them, then kind of had an opportunity at GSH, and I was only at GSH just under a year, and then an opportunity came up at JLL, which was going to be much more transformational. So the things that we'd learned, JLL were very serious about, this is what we want to do. We want to switch an on-demand service on. We want to instrument the space more to change the journey. In this case, it was mainly about engineering to start with, but the same for those that provide janitorial services. So I've ended up kind of finding my way through a number of companies with this growing desire to the companies wanting to change the way we offer service. And you really need to be the size of a JLL, a CBRE, a kind of ISS to be able to invest in driving the change from the service end, but also have the range of clients that give you the capability to do it.
Excellent. Great career. And I see you kind of went from the smaller service providers like Bouygues, NG Bailey up to where you are now. I mean, how does it differ working for kind of like, one of the smaller providers to one of the larger ones like where you are now? Because obviously JLL they're massive.
They are. In some cases, it's the range of different services you interact with. So service lines, we productize them in JLL. But if you were at Bouygues, we may do, 10 or 11 things, and you do it really, really well. But Bouygues was kind of more of a specialist attached to PFIs and Triple P, which had done really well around the world between here, Canada and Kuwait, and you sat within that group. And actually Bouygues, which some people don't really know them that well, but they're a giant company because they do really, really complex engineering. So like the nuclear shelter out in Chernobyl, they were the core company that designed and built. They were one of the 3 companies that built Channel Tunnel, and yet we've never heard of them. And at the time, part of the contract was looking after the Cabinet Office and number 10. So people wouldn't have known there was, it's a French-owned company. A French company was doing the Cabinet Office. And the beauty of it, because the business unit itself was fairly small and a bit specialised, so they were pretty quick at getting things done. So decisions were fairly quick, but also their risk appetite was probably a bit more reserved. At Bailey's, they were a different focus on engineering, but they were they would genuinely engineer excellence from, if you like, the heavy electrical world, which is largely where they'd come from when they'd started, years back in Yorkshire. So everything there was about linking, which again was really interesting, was linking the cross-sell, and could we connect what heavy engineering was doing to kind of projects, and I was part of the team that helped form a direct projects team, and then linking it to the IT division about could we introduce IT. So there was kind of a different matrix on the way that we would always look for cross-sell to try and bring the components of the company together to ensure all of those services were being layered on as an offering to the client. And then you went to GSH, which GSH had a really interesting history. It had been a wholly owned company, gone public, come back to a wholly owned company. And then it sold its UK arm and centered its HQ in the States with Mark as the CEO. And they had a huge APAC division. And they were really interesting, where they had looked at all the impacts of cost to serve, where it wasn't really value add. And they, they're kind of badged the way they use it, especially in the States, is they're the outsourcer that outsources. So things like they kind of came up with a better setup for Maximo, worked really closely with IBM, and then used a kind of outsource function to run their CAFM. So they didn't carry a big, heavy CAFM team. They got somebody to do it. They, with Claire Perry, she'd set up the way we do supply chain management, which was, it was really dynamic, the way we worked with the supply chain and the way we had them on our systems, which worked really well for the supply chain and really well for GSH. And then they concentrated on their own teams delivering the engineering. Even HR to a point was outsourced. So where they'd gone to that platform approach, it was incredibly efficient. So getting stuff done was really quick. Really, really quick. It's probably the quickest for any of the companies I work with. And then when you come to JLL, JLL is a Leviathan. It's circa 100,000 employees around the world, because it does work in, full 3 regions. We've got APAC division, the Americas division, and EMEA. And they've got these divisions within divisions of what the business is offering in terms of the investment capability, the valuation advisory, that kind of real estate function, and corporate solutions. And now we've grown a technology tower as a 4th component of the business. So their focus was very much on how do we leverage, how do we become the technologists that drive the change in the business. But to a point, don't be overly technology led, because it's about people. The technology is the enablement. And because they're going through this big transformation at the moment as a team, which we're part of, it's working how you don't over centralize at the moment, because at the moment, if you want a decision, we have to be really careful about who's making the decision across budgets. So I think there's a bit of a journey about how can we get that agility while still fitting in, because JLL is able to offer so much and works on such a big scale. That's probably the difference, that it can offer so much and offers really good value, but the decision making is then slower. And it would be, you're trying to get to that point where you've got sufficient agility where you can deliver really quality service, but you're empowering within, as close to the cold face as possible, the decision making, which we haven't nailed that yet. That's what we're moving towards, and 2021 is going to afford us that, I think.
Excellent. And having worked for different service providers over the years, how would you say that the service provider, the service industry has changed within the FM sector, do you think?
I think the move towards using digital techniques and tools. So it has been changing, and there's no mistake in that. Everyone now does use some kind of CAFM. We're seeing much more go out to handsets where people are using an app, where originally when it started, that was kind of a little bit unique. And so like Bouygues, they already used Maximo and they used it really, really well. But that kind of is the Rolls Royce of those CAFM enterprise asset management systems. What's changed is there's, as you get, you can get platforms now that sit in the cloud, and as cloud computing has gained traction, it's easy just to get software as a service where you can compete rather than having to delve into millions for a big CAFM. So because of that, everyone has started to normalise the business working much more digitally, and that's probably been the biggest change. And with it, starts to offer you the ability to be more efficient, but also be much more transparent with the client.
Cool. So I was going to ask you, there's, you're probably aware that there's always been, or there has been for a while, a skills shortage that gets talked about in the industry, lack of engineers and stuff. So what do you think can be done? I mean, obviously this week's National Apprenticeship Week. I'm not sure if you're aware. I saw that kind of crop up.
Yeah.
So what do you think the industry can do more in order to kind of close that skills shortage gap, do you reckon? And do you think the gap can be got rid of ever, or is it always going to be there? Because I think, yeah,
that's a really good question, and it comes with a couple of challenges.
Yeah.
Do we genuinely have a skills gap? And we think we do, because when we contract, I'm going to say SFG 20. So let's use an engineering, because it's not just engineering, but the engineering example is a really good one. We contract against a calendar-based set of events on assets that are declared whether they're needed or not. So as a result, you end up with a capacity demand. So it says, I will need an electrician to do this many hours, whether or not it's value-added work. And I will need to employ an electrician for 12 months a year to go to, I don't know, 400 buildings, look at something, tick a sheet or press a button on an electronic form. And in terms of the actual engineering or the technical interaction somebody does, I would love for somebody to give me some accurate figures on it, because I guarantee you the figures don't equate to the capacity we force onto the workforce. I guarantee you, 100%. So I think the first step is change our employment model.
Right.
So a really good one to look at. It's slightly different because it's different skills, but where you generally do have globally some skill access challenge for things like higher tech projects. So full stack coders or front end coders or a JavaScript coder. In truth, you're not always going to want somebody with that skill set sat within a team 12 months a year where you give them full-term contract. What you want to be able to do is access them. The rate per day will be higher, but they can have flexible work, and you need some way to access them. So there's a really good one that Harvard Business Review just looked at, which is called Top Talent. Top Talent, it's supposed to be for. So it's a website where people make themselves available and you connect through the website. So what I've posed, because I've looked at this, is our current employment model as we start to look at on demand is, I will want access to 130% of my work capability every day. Which is a magic figure. I know this because when we remanned warships, we needed a way to access 130% of our capability without it all being manned on a ship. So when we sent a ship off to the Gulf, in most cases, you will need a set of engineers for the first 4 or 5 days, because you tune, you set fuel economy, you do some tuning in of the radar. But then for quite a lot of the time, those guys then clean or they take ancillary duties until something breaks or until they get to a heavy maintenance period. So when we looked at that as a problem, we said, well, why don't we take them off in Gibraltar and then they can do the next ship coming behind them? Because we don't need them on that ship all the time. Why don't we forward base a set of engineers out in the Gulf and run a base there? And then in terms of the actual capacity of what they need to do, we could generate 130% of the capacity need, but we actually generated a 35% reduction in the headcount need. So it was matching your capacity task to where your headcount was. So the rest of the headcount we took on, while they did ancillary duties, they could train, they could take leave, they could do other things. Now, not perfect, but it did alleviate this issue. So in our workplace, there is one company that looked at it around taxis.
Right, okay.
Said, Uber, that's how Uber operated. It says, at any one time, Saturday night in London, I probably need access to 5,000 taxis every hour. But as a company, I'm not going to employ 5,000 taxi drivers just because I need it on Saturday. So they broke the problem down in a different way and said, why don't we let people who have the ability to provide transport at the right times, the right skill set in a way, to use a platform to make themselves available, fulfill that service against the set rules. And then when we've got a client set that have a certain need and the capacity changes, it goes up and down, and we connect them through a platform. So I see it as having the platform connection. You will still need business interaction where you give people a different employment option. And actually working with recruiters who don't recruit the same way anymore. It's more about holding clubs of people in the right area with the right skill set, keeping them current, and it means they can make themselves available. And as it is, we have a product that operates that way, which we will be introducing. So it's a little bit like the Pimlico Plumbers model. Charlie Mullins cracked it years ago, just didn't do it stale. He did it. He did it in a very focused way. And, Pimlico Plumbers is a bit expensive, but they do first-time fix. And when they deliver, they're absolutely top quality and there's no knocking them. So we want to try and reform throughout 2021 that can we look at the employment model? So if I'm an electrician, I make myself available on a platform, but I won't necessarily always be serving a JLL. I may be serving Mighty or I may be serving ISS, but to be on the platform, I have to be 18th edition. I have to have done a job within the last 10 days. I must do so many jobs every 30 days to ensure that I'm current. and I must score 4 stars throughout a 30-day period to stay on the platform.
Right, interesting. Yeah, I see.
Very different. And when you look at that at capacity, it means we do still have a skill shortage.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, it's not so scary. It becomes manageable. And then you can do things like the apprenticeship scheme isn't used well enough, mainly because in some cases it's forced because there's a policy to try and get us to use it. And in some cases, some of the apprenticeships need encouragement with focused delivery to a certain sector. So a great one's Hallam University, the way that's looked at FMs. That's a really good one, delivering FM.
Yeah.
Likewise, you look at the functions in real estate. You know, if you go meet a chartered surveyor that's working for CBRE or JLL, normally they've been to Reading University and done the course at Reading University. So with those, there's this genius that works within networking and innovation called Ian Tracy. So people look him up and connect with him. He runs this group now called Acorn. And they're looking at how you can bring companies that have fintech, prop tech, whatever it is you want. They're looking at a little bit of technology. And you can go to university and say, I've got a need, or a college, I've got a need that I will be taking on 50 people a year that need skill sets that drive towards this service delivery or what this future problem is. They then can get the necessary funding. They can form a course that feeds your company's needs. So with that, and it comes down to the magic C word, collaboration. And the pandemic should have taught us, yes, there's always a bit of competition within the space, but it's kind of synergistic in a way that you all have to scratch each other's back as well. Because inevitably, you know, we'll go against a bid, and say Integral's going on a bid, they might have failed on a bid against ISS.
Yeah.
One of our biggest contracts, ISS, have a huge chunk of it because they do the cleaning for us.
Yeah.
So, and with that, it means you've got to be growing up in your collaboration. So within accessing the skill set and the right pool, the only way it will work is collaboration. It's just who gets to put those platforms forward first, put the rules in and make it work. For the client, it's single pane of glass interaction that gives them assured delivery. So by dropping an app, so you could go on and drop our facilities on demand app, there's some technology behind it and we've got a load of management behind it, but to a point, you're not committing to a contract, you're putting your need forward, it will be serviced, it's guaranteed. It's still guaranteed as if you had a contract. It's driven by reputation, it's driven by collaboration. Let's use the engineering again. If you're the engineer, you are rewarded in a different way that's much more interactive, because we're looking at how we can gamify the experience so that you're not just rewarded with your salary, but there's ways for you to drive greater value, kind of hit bonus in a day. Charlie Mullins does it. You know, if you hit 5 jobs on gas, you go into a next level pay band and you kind of bonus up. So that's what we're going to be able to do for our people, whether it's somebody doing 4 mobile cleans and they all score 4 or 5 stars. Well, you want to be able to reward on that, because that is encouraging really high levels of service, but it's encouraging as well greater levels of productivity. And there's a huge productivity challenge within the UK, and it's because we've just not been dynamic enough to change how we interact with each other, and how we look at delivering, especially around service and products a different way. And I think we've got grand plans about trying to deliver some of this, but I think it's just a much more exciting way for people to work together.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's going to be, the next few years are going to be exciting, I think, in terms of the technology that's out there. And I think that people within the FM industry or the industry is starting to realise that actually we're a bit behind other industries with technology. I'm starting to see new companies crop up that are kind of more prop tech companies, and like you mentioned earlier on, the ubererization of service streams or facilities management, and kind of, having those platforms where it's just going to be essentially just all on your phone. The client's just going to go, right, need a Sparky, need this, where do, bang, 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 push. And so
you're right.
It's quite exciting times, really.
I think, if you're going to find an industry, and perhaps it's an industry that wasn't fully understood before, we spend 87% of our time in some kind of work or transport or building. Yeah. That's where our time is spent. It is an industry that's it hasn't been at the forefront, mainly because it's high volumes, low margin. It's quite expensive to invest in buildings. Pandemic's lifted the lid on it, but if you want what's now going to be the fast-paced, quite exciting industry, and I think it will be quite breathless with quite a few, especially when they've been used to operating a certain way, it's this industry. There will be a demand, not just by going to an app to say, I want these services, just as interesting as I want this space. So we look at, you look at retail on the high street, people said it's dead. It's not dead, it's just going through a painful transformation. Yeah. Because we've been holding on to the idea, it's just, we want shops. our shopping behaviours would have changed massively now anyway. You know, after 80 days, it sets completely for everyone new norms. But that space just becomes reusable. So again, we've looked at, you kind of got hub, club, roam and home in the way you will work. So your hub will be your main offices. So that space will still be used, perhaps not in the same volume, but it will become different orientation, not just rows of desks where people can tap a key. But likewise, you may want some club space. So, you know, where I live, as in the village I live, I think there's 10 main players in the real estate industry, from a company called Montague Evans, BNP Paribas, a couple of guys run their own company. Tim lives across another village, who's our kind of head of London markets. Now, if we were going to have a meeting collectively, normally we would all be in London, and we would probably use one of the meeting rooms in London at Warwick Street, or perhaps over at Montague Evans, or in one of our buildings. But we may all leave Oxfordshire, go on a train, travel all the way in, and in that, you look at our carbon footprint that day. We've all got quite big cars. We all sit on the train, we travel across London to go and use an office probably for 2 hours. Or where we've got a redefined high street, you could go onto an app, find a club spot where there's an office we could rent with a meeting room and probably get catering. And we could take that for 2 hours and someone would make money about it, but we're connected as a company. Now, I think literally millions of people will want that service. The other part then is, just as quickly, as long as my system works, I want it to be able to work in a pub. So I book a table at a pub, and perhaps we do it at a pub, and I still want my service as this is at home. So the digital services connecting to the real estate services, connected to the people services, that's what I think 2021 is going to focus on generating, 2022 will deliver.
Yeah, no, it's exciting times. It really is. It really is. I like the idea of doing meetings in pubs again as well. it's been
or doing anything in a pub.
I know. It's been so long. We're in the office, we are, and going home and just seeing all the, we'll pop out for lunch. It's basically Pret at the moment in central London. That's the only thing that's open. And just walking past all these pubs that are closed down, it's just, it's a shame. It's just a crying shame. It really is. Desperate for a pint.
I think there's a message in the sense about 150 billion that will hit that retail again, that sort of restaurant, pub, leisure. I think we should commit to get back into pubs as soon as humanly possible, and do a lot more business in there to ensure we help them recover.
I think it'll definitely happen. That's going to be, It's probably going to be the last thing to open though, isn't it? The pubs and restaurants, I imagine, because it's where we're all mixing, breathing on each other or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of.
And I think the government how they did look and go. It kind of was the thing that revamped it last time, because even with the rules, people relax. You touch in, it's close proximity. We kind of need the vaccine program to be nice and stable, and then get pubs open as quickly as humanly possible.
Massively. So, Mickey, it's been a pleasure. Just one final question before we end. What would your advice be to anybody? I ask everybody this. What would your advice be to anybody who's just started out in their career in the FM sector? What advice would you give them?
Probably, there's a quote I heard from my kids' school the other day. They had someone walking across the Antarctic, and he resonated with something that someone had said, that set a plan, but within your plan, hope is not a strategy, luck is not a factor, but fear shouldn't be the reason you don't do it. So plan out, where do you want to be and why, and against that, what do you need to do in terms of lifelong learning? Because if you're hitting the sector now, the rate of change is going to be like nothing the sector's ever had, and it's starting to happen. And you need to ensure you're a comfortable digital native. You need some good numbers skills. If you weren't so cool on numbers, get better at numbers. And the bit that's really well worth working on is the networking. FM, for all of its digitization and all of the process and using systems, it's still a trust game. And for part of the trust, you need a network, but you need to ensure that, for all your capabilities, trust will sell more, that you are true to your commitment. And if you can build a network and you're trusted, you absolutely fly within this sector, because people will come to you, become a natural problem solver, you become an honest broker. And the more people can see that, the more you become wanted, not just as an employee, but people want to bring work to you as well. And that's probably one that I found is that network and being open and honest. Sometimes being bold means that, you networks, you know what's going on all the time, which obviously offers business growth opportunities, and you can see we need to change. But it also means there's always support there, because you're not one person ever going to solve all the problems. It means you can know who you go to. and if you're trusted, someone will work with you. So
Yeah,
that's probably it.
No, I massively agree. And I think with platforms like LinkedIn and the rest of it, it's it just helps. And I think that this pandemic has just kind of accelerated the industry into using LinkedIn more and being on there more and having that network while we're all sat at home and stuff. So cool. Mickey, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. And listen, hopefully we'll catch up soon in a pub this year.
In a pub, absolutely. Yeah. Drinks are on me.
Nice one. Take care. All the best.
Catch you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.